Hi, I had a few minutes this evening, so I thought I'd make another video, and I'd use the time to solve one of the problems with the slideshow that we've been working on. So far, our slideshow, it looks like this, and we've just added these buttons. So now we can, go back or go to the next slide. What our slideshow needs is it needs some little dots or something down here to indicate which slide we're on, right? And, why don't we take a look at the Bootstrap site, and you can see this is their slideshow with indicators, and you can click on the indicator, you can click on the buttons here, and you can see the indicator kind of gets highlighted to show you which slide that you're on, right? They've used markup here to create the indicators, and essentially you add an OL and you give it this carousel indicators class name, and then you put a list item in there for each of the indicators, right? So these list items, they're just empty, but they are drawn as like little kind of rectangles, right? So that's pretty good. We can kind of follow the same thing here, but maybe do it a little bit differently. I'm kind of liking the idea of just including the OL for the indicators and not including the list items, and maybe generating the list items dynamically. The way that this is set up is you'd have to have a list item one for one, slides to list items up here, right? So you'd have to have a list item and a slide, and then another one, right? If I had three of these, I'd have to have 3 slides. And if you made a mistake, then maybe one would be missing. So I kind of figure like maybe, if we know how many slides we have, then we should just generate list items for them, like one for each, right? And we'll just do that automatically maybe, right? Or anyway, that's kind of my rough plan, right? Okay, so let's go back to our code and take a look. So far we've got some code at the top here that gets the reference to the inner slide and the images inside there, and then makes some buttons. This is getting pretty crowded, so why don't we put a couple comments in to organize our code. So I'm going to say, set up buttons, and then my button setup goes all the way down to here. And then this thing is kind of like, I think it's like setup timer, right? And then I have some helper functions down here. So this is kind of like the functions that run my system, right? So I'll move this over here, right? Okay, great. So now where do we want to create the indicators? Well, maybe, after we set up buttons, we'll set up the indicators, and we'll use a similar strategy, right? So we'll check to see if, if our element exists, and if it does, we'll check that it's not null, and then we'll maybe create the elements and and add them to the DOM. Okay, so let's go to our markup here, and we're going to add this. Actually, I added this earlier. I was kind of playing around, so I actually added this OL, and I gave it the class name MS slide indicators, right? And I put that not inside the slides inner, but inside the main slides div. It's kind of right next to these buttons, right? So it's in the same level as the buttons. Okay, and then I put a comment here to kind of remind me that I'm going to generate some dynamic content there. Okay, so now we're good. So we need this class name. Let's borrow that. And then I'm going to go back to the code here, and maybe after the button code but before the timer code, I'll make another comment here that's like setup indicators. Okay, great. So now let's try and get a reference to the indicator container, right? So I'll call it like indicator container equals slides dot query selector, and I want to get MS slide indicators, and don't miss the dot there, right? I did that earlier, right, where I forgot the dot and it didn't work, right? So I want to get this MS slide indicators, and it's a class name, and I'm using query selector, so I have to include the dot. Okay, so if this is working, then we should be able to check it and see if it exists or not. Right? So if it doesn't exist, then this will be null, and then we don't have to, do anything else, right? But if it does exist, I'll say not equal to null. Then we'll want to run some code, right? So what we'll want to do here is we'll want to generate a, an indicator like an li item and add it to the DOM. Let's take a different strategy here just for fun, just to do things a little bit differently. But earlier we had generated a string of HTML and then used inner HTML to add that string to another element. So what I'm going to do this time is a little bit different. I'm going to make a list item, but I'm going to make it by saying document.create element. Okay? So this generates a new tag, and you can say the name of the tag here. So essentially this will generate a new list item like this. Okay? If I generate the list item here, it's not actually attached to the DOM. So I've just put it in a variable, right? And it exists. We've created it, but it's not in the DOM. It's not actually added to the document, right? So in order to add it to the document, we have to add one more step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, like I want to put this thing, make it a child of this indicator container. So what I'll do is I'll say indicator container dot append child, and then I'll append the list item. Okay? So we'll do this a little bit differently. We'll do it all in code with elements. Okay? So that's pretty good. So now, now that I have this, right, we can see if it works, right? So ideally, let's go back to our page here and get the inspect element. And if I refresh, if I inspect the DOM and I go to the body and then I go to my slideshow div, this first one, and then I find the OL here and I open it up, oh, I got one element here, right? So there's one. So maybe we got to add more, right? And then if I look at the second slideshow div right here, we can view this guy, and it doesn't have any because it doesn't have that OL, so it just skipped over that block of code. Okay, so this is working pretty good, but actually I want to make a whole bunch of these. So actually not a whole bunch, I want to make exactly a number of them that's equal to the length of the images array. Okay, so right, because I got images, and it's actually an array-like object. It's a node list, but we can count it. We can say what's your length, and it'll tell me like 3 or 4 or whatever, right? So, and then if we made another slideshow with a different number of images, we'd get this, we'd count it again and make the right number of indicators. So what we'll do is we'll loop through the images array. So I'm going to say I'm going to say I is less than images dot length, and then I plus equals 1. And then what we'll do for each item or each image we find, we'll create a new list item and push it into or append it to the indicator container, right? So now if we test our code, we should have 4 list items, right? Because there's 4 slides, Okay, now here's a little note, right? This, when we do inner HTML, it would replace this comment or any other content here when you set inner HTML. When you do append, it just adds it to the end, so you keep any existing content, okay? Okay, so anyway, so we're doing pretty good now, right? We got our list items. We don't actually see them here because they're empty and we haven't styled them. So let's add some styles, right? And actually, just for fun, actually, I kind of feel like we should actually do the styles in our style sheet, but we can actually do the styles here in code too. So we can just give that a try if you want. Maybe we'll do this. Actually, we should. I think we did that in the other video. So, and I think it'd actually be better to keep the styles in our style sheet. So let's do that. So I want to get the indicator container, that's this guy, and add some styles to it, right? So let's put some styles here. I'm back in my style sheet, and I'm going to make this position absolute, right? And then I'll say, how about display flex? We'll use flex to lay out the indicators, right? Let's say margin 0, padding 0, and then so we got position absolute. Let's also say we'll have to put it in the middle. So let's say left of 50%, and then we'll have to do transform translate, and this time I'm going to say negative 50% on the X and 0 on the Y. And then we'll say, actually, you know, maybe I'll keep this over here. So left and then bottom of 1M, something like that. That's roughly what we need. So now we need to style the children of this MS slide indicators, right? So if there's any children here, they'll be LI tags, right? And we'll give each of these guys a style. And actually, I realize this is a list. We should say list style none, because we don't want to see the bullet point, right? So we'll get rid of that. And now let's style these guys. So I'll give each of these, well, I'm going to make mine like little circles. So I'll say width of 10 pixels, height of 10 pixels, and border radius of 50%, right? And then we'll give it a background color of RGBA 255, 255, 255, and 50% transparent, right? And let's take a look and see what we have here. Oh, hey, there's my little dots, right? So that was pretty good. Maybe they need like a little bit of space between them, right? And maybe they're a little small too. Let's make them like a little bit bigger. What if we made them like 16 by 16? And then maybe I'll give each of these some margin, right? So that'll push all the other, you know, push them away from each other. So we'll give them a, how about, I'm not sure. Let's do 8 pixels margin. Maybe that's going to be too much. I don't know. Let's try it. Oh, that doesn't look too bad. Maybe they could be like a little closer. Let's make it like 4. Okay, so that's looking pretty good, right? And we'll stop here, and then in the next video we'll handle like styling these so the current indicator is highlighted to match the number of the slide. Okay, so anyway, thanks for watching, and you know, you can try that on your own. Essentially the goal here would be in code to listen for changes, or actually we don't really need a listener, but when we see a change to the slide, then we need to highlight the indicator, right? So every time a slide changes, okay? So essentially, like maybe like show slide would need to do the job, right? And there's a few ways to handle that. You could apply a style to the indicator container, but that would only be the container. And maybe if you did nth child, right, in your style sheet, but maybe that's not going to work. Maybe we got to have a reference to each of the LI items. So maybe we have to save these and then we can style them, right? So anyway, I'll leave that for you to ponder, and then we'll maybe talk about it in the next video.